The dinner table fell silent. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that feels like the air has been sucked from the room. Valentina Fernandez de Rojas had just leaned toward her daughter and whispered words she believed only they could understand. Lo siento, mi amor.
No quiero que mi nieto nazca en esta miseria con este perdedor arrastrado. Tienes que dejarlo.
I'm sorry, my love. I don't want my grandchild born into this misery with this pathetic loser. You have to leave him. She didn't know her son-in-law, the man she'd spent 3 weeks humiliating, had understood every single word. Not just tonight. Every insult, every comparison, every cutting remark disguised in her native tongue. Until Jalen Creed set down his fork, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and in flawless, razor-sharp Spanish replied,
Yo pago todo. La casa. La comida. Hasta esta cena que estás comiendo ahora mismo. No soy un perdedor. Solo soy el hombre que sacrifica todo por una mujer que ya no me ve.
I pay for everything. The house, the food, even this dinner you're eating right now. I'm not a loser. I'm just the man who sacrifices everything for a woman who no longer sees me. Valentina went pale. Camila's hand trembled over her belly, where a secret was still unspoken. And Jalen? He stood, placed his napkin down gently, and walked out, not in rage, in sorrow. True hearts, if you've ever been judged, overlooked, or underestimated, if you've ever loved someone so much you silenced your own pain, then this story was written for you. Hit that like button, subscribe to Twisted Love Tales, and send those hypes because this journey is going to break you before it heals you. Now, let me tell you how it all began. Jalen Creed was not the kind of man who demanded attention. At 34, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that most people mistook for weakness. He stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders that had known labor long before they knew love. His skin was deep brown, smooth like carved mahogany, and his eyes dark, patient, heavy with things unsaid. Had a way of making people feel seen even when he himself was invisible. He kept his beard neat, his clothes simple, his voice soft unless softness stopped working. Back in Philadelphia, Jalen had been a Spanish teacher. Not just fluent, masterful. He'd spent 4 years in Bogotá during his early 20s, teaching English in exchange programs while absorbing the culture, the rhythm, the soul of the language. Spanish wasn't just something he spoke. It was something he felt. But none of that mattered now. Now, Jalen lived in Medellin, Colombia, his wife's homeland. In a modest 2-bedroom house with cracked tiles at the doorstep and a leaking faucet he kept promising to fix. He'd given up his teaching career 18 months ago, when Camila convinced him the move would be temporary. Just until things settle, she'd said. We'll build something beautiful. He believed her. He believed in them. So he followed her across an ocean, into a country where his degrees meant nothing and his accent made people laugh. He taught English online for pennies, walked dogs in wealthy neighborhoods, cleaned ghost houses, did food deliveries on a borrowed scooter. He worked 3 jobs, sometimes 4, and every night, he came home with sweat-soaked clothes and an empty wallet, hoping today would be the day Camila looked at him the way she used to. But lately, all he found was distance. What happens when the woman you sacrificed everything for stops seeing your sacrifice? And what happens when her mother arrives, not to visit but to destroy? Camila Fernandez was the kind of woman who made rooms fall silent. At 31, she possessed a beauty that felt almost architectural. High cheekbones sculpted like her mother's, full lips that curved into smiles she rarely gave freely, and long dark hair that cascaded past her shoulders like black silk. Her skin was warm bronze, kissed by the Colombian sun she'd grown up under. But it was her eyes that had captured Jalen 5 years ago in a crowded Philadelphia coffee shop. Honey brown, curious, sad in ways she never explained. She'd been studying international business on a student visa. He'd been grading papers at the corner table. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours. By the 3rd date, Jalen knew he'd marry her. By the 6th month, he did. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that marrying Camila meant inheriting a war he never signed up for. Camila came from money. Old money. The kind that built haciendas and hired housekeepers and vacationed in Europe without checking prices. Her father, Eduardo Fernandez, had been a respected coffee exporter before his death 6 years ago. Her mother, Valentina, had spent the years since then guarding the family's reputation like a dragon protecting gold. And in Valentina's eyes, Jalen was not gold. He was rust, a black American man with no family connections.
No inheritance. No prestige sernam.
Just love, and love to Valentina was a luxury poor people used to justify bad decisions. She never said it directly, not in English anyway, but in Spanish. She said everything. Jalen remembered the first time he met Valentina. It was 2 months before the wedding. During a video call Camila had nervously arranged. Valentina had smiled politely, asked surface-level questions, complimented his interesting accent. Then, thinking he couldn't understand, she turned to Camila and whispered, "Estás segura, Mija?
Hay tantos hombres buenos aquí. ¿Por qué este?
Are you sure, my daughter? There are so many good men here. Why this one?" Camila had laughed it off, changed the subject. Jalen had said nothing. He told himself it didn't matter, that he'd win Valentina over with time, with kindness, with proof that his love was enough. 5 years later, he was still proving, still losing. The tragedy of Jalen Creed was not that he was unloved. It was that he was unseen. Camila did love him, at least she had, but somewhere between the move to Colombia, the financial strain, and her mother's relentless whispers, that love had become buried beneath exhaustion and doubt. She stopped asking about his day, stopped noticing when he came home late, stopped defending him when Valentina's comments cut too deep. She wasn't cruel. She was tired, confused, caught between the man she'd chosen and the mother she'd never learned to disappoint. And Jalen? He noticed everything. He noticed how Camila's laughter returned when her mother visited, but only when he wasn't in the room. He noticed how she texted more frequently with people she never mentioned. He noticed how she flinched when he reached for her hand in public, as if his touch embarrassed her. He never confronted her, never demanded explanations, because deep down, Jalen feared the answer. He feared that maybe, just maybe, Valentina was right. Maybe Camila had settled. Maybe love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. So he worked harder, slept less, smiled through the exhaustion, and every night, he lay beside a woman who felt further away than the ocean he'd crossed for her. What Jalen didn't know was that Camila was keeping a secret of her own, one that would change everything, one that her mother would try to weaponize, and one that would force Camila to finally choose between the family she came from and the family she was building. The knock came on a Tuesday afternoon. Jalen had just returned from walking 3 dogs in the El Poblado neighborhood, a gig that paid barely enough to cover their water bill. His shirt clung to his chest, damp with sweat. His legs ached. His spirit ached more. He was reaching for the door handle when it swung open from the outside. And there she stood,
Valentina Fernández de Rojas.
5'6" of designer perfume and silent judgment. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned in an elegant bun. Her lips were painted deep burgundy. Her eyes, cold, calculating, scanned Jalen from head to toe like he was a stain on her daughter's life. Behind her sat 2 Gucci suitcases, not the kind you pack for a weekend visit. "Valentina," Jalen managed, forcing a smile. "We weren't expecting you." She brushed past him without acknowledgement, her heels clicking against the cracked tiles. "Dios mío," she muttered under her breath.
Huele a perro mojado aquí.
"My God, it smells like wet dog in here." Jalen's jaw tightened. He understood every word, but he swallowed it, smiled wider. "Camila's in the bedroom," he said. "I'll get her." Valentina didn't respond. She was already circling their living room like a health inspector examining a failing restaurant. She touched the curtains and grimaced, studied the furniture with visible disgust, picked up their air freshener, shook it, and whispered to herself,
¿Esto qué es? Huele a pobreza.
"What is this? Smells like poverty." Camila emerged from the bedroom, and for a moment, genuine joy crossed her face. Mama! She rushed into Valentina's arms. Why didn't you call? I would have prepared. Prepared what? Valentina interrupted, gesturing around the room. There's nothing here worth preparing, Mija. I came because I was worried. You sounded tired on the phone. Her eyes slid toward Jalen, still standing by the door, still dripping sweat, still invisible.
Y ahora veo por qué, she added quietly.
And now I see why. Camila's smile faltered, but she said nothing, just guided her mother toward the guest room, chattering nervously about dinner plans and local restaurants. Jalen stood alone in the doorway. The house that had felt small before now felt suffocating. The first 3 days were tolerable. Valentina kept her comments subtle, disguised as concern, wrapped in motherly advice. Mija, you look so thin. Is he feeding you properly? This neighborhood. Is it safe at night? I worry about you. Have you considered coming home? Just for a while. Always in Spanish. Always assuming Jalen was deaf to her poison. But by the end of the first week, the subtlety vanished. Valentina stopped whispering. She started performing. She would sit across from Jalen at breakfast and speak directly to Camila as if he weren't there, laughing at jokes he supposedly couldn't understand, making observations about his appearance, his fatigue, his failures. He looks tired all the time, maybe because broke men can't sleep. You're too beautiful to waste your youth in this shack. I raised you for palaces, not prisons. Each word was a knife. And Camila? She would roll her eyes occasionally, mutter a half-hearted mama, basta, mom, enough, but she never truly stopped it, never truly defended him, and her silence became its own language. One evening, Jalen overheard something that made his blood freeze. He was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when Valentina's voice drifted from the living room, clear and confident. There's a man I want you to meet. Rodrigo.
Fernando son.
He's back from Madrid. Wealthy. Educated. Single. A pause. Then Valentina's voice dropped lower, but not low enough. He's what you should have waited for, Mija. You made a mistake. But it's not too late to fix it. Jalen's hands stopped moving. Water ran over his frozen fingers. He waited for Camila's response. Waited for her to defend their marriage, their vows, their life. Instead, he heard nothing, just silence. And silence, he was learning, was the loudest betrayal of all. 2 weeks passed. Valentina didn't leave. Instead, she settled in like a permanent resident, rearranging furniture, criticizing meals, and slowly redecorating their home with her opinions. Jalen watched it happen, watched his sanctuary become occupied territory. He worked longer hours now, not because they needed more money, but because home had stopped feeling like home. He took extra dog-walking clients, picked up night shifts teaching English to businessmen overseas, delivered food until midnight on the borrowed scooter. Anything to avoid those walls, those whispers, that woman. But exhaustion follows a man everywhere. And loneliness? Loneliness sleeps beside you. One night, Jalen came home at 11. His body screamed for rest. His stomach growled. He'd skipped dinner to finish a delivery. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Camila sat at the table, alone. A plate of cold rice and beans sat across from her, clearly meant for him. You're late, she said softly, not accusatory. Tired. Client ran over. He sat down heavily, rubbing his face. Long day. She watched him eat in silence. For a moment it felt like before Valentina, before the distance, before everything cracked. Jalen, she started. He looked up. Something flickered in her eyes. Vulnerability. Fear. Words trapped behind walls she'd built herself. What is it? She opened her mouth, closed it, shook her head. Nothing. Just, I'm glad you're home. He wanted to believe her, wanted to reach across and hold her hand like he used to, but something stopped him. A voice in his head, Valentina's voice. reminding him that maybe Camila was only here because she hadn't found her exit yet. He finished eating in silence. The moment passed. The walls returned. The next morning, Jalen discovered something that made his chest tighten. He was searching for his phone charger in the living room when he noticed Camila's tablet on the coffee table. Screen still glowing. A message thread was open, between Camila and someone named Rodrigo. His heart pounded as he read. Rodrigo, it was wonderful seeing you yesterday. Coffee again soon? Camila, maybe. Things are complicated right now. Rodrigo, I understand. But you deserve someone who makes things simple. Remember that. Jalen's hands trembled. He set the tablet down carefully, exactly where he'd found it. Coffee. She'd had coffee with him, without mentioning it, without telling Jalen anything. He wanted to scream, wanted to confront her, wanted to demand answers. Instead, he grabbed his keys and left for work. Because what could he say? How could he fight a ghost? A man who represented everything Jalen wasn't. Wealthy, connected, approved. That evening, Valentina struck again. She was showing Camila photos on her phone. Photos of Rodrigo, no doubt, when Jalen walked through the door.
Mira qué guapo, Valentina Cud. Y tan exitoso.
His father just bought him a penthouse in Bogota. Imagine living there instead of this. Look how handsome and so successful. She gestured vaguely at their home, at their life. Jalen. Camila shifted uncomfortably. Mama, please. ¿Qué? He doesn't understand. Look at him. He's clueless. Jalen stood frozen by the door. Every muscle tensed. Every instinct screamed to respond. To unleash the Spanish he'd been hiding. To expose her cruelty. But something held him back. Not weakness. Strategy. Because Jalen realized something in that moment. Valentina's arrogance was her blind spot. She believed her words were invisible, protected, private, and as long as she believed that, she would keep revealing her true intentions. So he smiled, nodded, walked to the bedroom, and waited. But waiting cost something. Each silent day extracted a piece of his soul. Each swallowed insult buried itself deeper into his chest. He was running out of patience. And Valentina? She was running out of time. She just didn't know it yet. 3 weeks. 21 days of insults. 500 whispered cruelties. And tonight it would all end. Camila had insisted on a special dinner. She seemed nervous all day, adjusting tablecloths, lighting candles, asking Valentina to cook her famous bandeja paisa. Jalen noticed. He always noticed. But he'd stopped asking questions. Questions led to half-answers. Half-answers led to pain. So he showered, dressed in his cleanest shirt, and sat at the table like a man walking toward his own execution. The food was beautiful. Valentina had outdone herself. Plates overflowing with rice, beans, chicharron, fried egg, and plantains. The aroma filled the house, warm and deceptively welcoming. For the first 10 minutes, dinner was almost peaceful. Valentina complimented her own cooking. Camila pushed food around her plate nervously. Jalen ate in silence, savoring what might be his last meal in this house. Because he'd made a decision. Tonight he would speak. Tonight the mask would fall. He just needed the right moment. Valentina provided it. She leaned toward Camila, wine glass in hand, voice dripping with false sympathy.
Mija, tengo que decirte algo importante.
Daughter, I need to tell you something important. Camila stiffened. Mama, not now.
Sí, ahora.
He's right there eating like nothing matters. He doesn't understand us anyway. She laughed softly, cruelly.
Lo siento, mi amor. No quiero que mi nieto nazca en esta miseria con este perdedor arrastrado. Tienes que dejarlo.
I'm sorry, my love. I don't want my grandchild born into this misery with this pathetic loser. You have to leave him. The words hit Jalen like a freight train. Grandchild? His eyes shot to Camila. Her fork had frozen mid-air. Her face had gone pale. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And she hadn't told him. But Valentina had known. Valentina had been planning around a child that wasn't even born yet. Planning to remove Jalen from the picture before he could hold his own baby. Something inside him snapped. Not violently, quietly, like a rope pulled too tight finally giving way. He set down his fork, wiped his mouth slowly with the napkin. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Jalen Creed stopped pretending.
Yo pago todo.
His voice was calm, clear, fluent. Both women froze.
La casa. La comida. Hasta esta cena que estás comiendo ahora mismo.
The house. The food. Even this dinner you're eating right now. Valentina's wine glass trembled in her hand. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Jalen continued, his eyes never leaving hers.
No soy un perdedor. Solo soy el hombre que sacrifica todo por una mujer que ya no me ve. ¿Y usted? Usted ha pasado 3 semanas envenenando mi matrimonio mientras come mi comida y duerme bajo mi techo.
I'm not a loser. I'm just the man who sacrifices everything for a woman who no longer sees me. And you've spent 3 weeks poisoning my marriage while eating my food and sleeping under my roof. Silence. Deafening, suffocating silence. Camila's eyes filled with tears. Jalen, I was going to tell you. He stood slowly, placed his napkin on the table with painful precision. When, Camila? Before or after your mother convinced you to leave? She had no answer, just tears streaming down her face. Jalen looked at her one last time. This woman he'd crossed oceans for, sacrificed careers for, endured humiliation for. I loved you enough to stay silent, but I won't love you enough to disappear. And he walked out, not in rage, in sorrow. True hearts, pause here with me. Have you ever given everything to someone who stopped seeing your sacrifice? Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? This story isn't over. But this moment, this turning point is where everything changes. If this hits different, subscribe to Twisted Love Tales. Drop those hypes, because what comes next will test everything you believe about love, forgiveness, and second chances. Now, let me tell you what happened after he walked out that door. Jalen drove until the city lights blurred behind him. He didn't know where he was going. Didn't care. The borrowed scooter couldn't take him far. But far enough was all he needed. Far enough from that dining table. Far enough from Valentina's frozen face. Far enough from Camila's tears. He stopped at a lookout point above Medellin. The city sprawled beneath him, millions of lights flickering like earthbound stars. Somewhere down there was his home, his wife, his unborn child, and none of it felt like his anymore. He sat on the concrete barrier, letting the cool mountain air fill his lungs. Pregnant. The word echoed in his skull. Over and over. Pregnant. He was going to be a father. The dream he'd carried secretly for years. The image of teaching his child to ride a bike, to speak Spanish, to navigate a world that would judge them before knowing them. It was real now. Possible. But so was the pain. Because Camila hadn't told him. She'd told her mother first. Or maybe Valentina had discovered it and weaponized it before Camila could decide what to do. Either way, Jalen had been the last to know. Again. Always the last. Always outside. Always proving himself to people who'd already decided he wasn't enough. His phone buzzed. Camila. He declined the call. It buzzed again. And again. And again. 17 missed calls by midnight. 23 text messages. He read none of them. Meanwhile, back at the house, chaos had erupted. Camila stood in the living room, tears streaming, voice shaking with a fury she'd never directed at her mother before. You had no right. Valentina remained seated, arms crossed, unmoved. I had every right. I'm protecting you. Protecting me? Camila laughed bitterly. You've spent 3 weeks tearing apart my marriage. You invited Rodrigo into my life. You told me to leave my husband because he's not good enough for you. He's the father of my child. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Valentina's expression flickered, something between shock and calculation. Then it hardened again. Exactly why you need to think clearly now. A child changes everything. You can't raise a baby in poverty, Camila. You can't. Poverty. Camila's voice cracked. Mama, we're not poor. We're building. There's a difference. But you've never understood that because you've never had to build anything yourself. You inherited everything, including your cruelty. Valentina stood abruptly, face reddening. How dare you?
No.
How dare you? Camila stepped closer, trembling but unbroken. Jalen works 3 jobs. He comes home exhausted every single night. He gave up his career, his country, his entire life. For me. And you called him a loser? You told me to leave him while eating food he paid for. She shook her head slowly. I've been a coward, Mama. I let you say things I should have stopped. I let you poison something beautiful because I was too afraid to disappoint you. But I'm done. Valentina scoffed. You'll come back to your senses. You always do. Not this time. Camila grabbed her keys from the table. Where are you going? To find my husband. If he'll still have me. But Jalen wasn't answering. For 3 days he stayed away. Slept in his car. Showered at a gym. Worked his jobs like a ghost, present but hollow. He wasn't punishing Camila. He was surviving. Trying to breathe through the wreckage of everything he thought he knew. At night he stared at his phone. Read her messages finally. I'm so sorry. Please come home. I should have told you about the baby. I was scared. I love you. I never stopped. My mother is wrong. I know that now. Please, Jalen, don't give up on us. His thumb hovered over the reply button. But the words wouldn't come. Because love wasn't the problem. It had never been the problem. The problem was trust. Visibility. Being seen. And he didn't know if Camila could ever truly see him. Or if he'd always be the man she settled for while waiting for something better. On the 4th day, she found him. Jalen was sitting on a bench outside a small church in Envigado, a quiet neighborhood far from their home. He hadn't prayed in years, but something about the old stone walls felt safe, neutral, a place where judgment paused. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. Camila approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes swollen from days of crying. She looked nothing like the polished woman her mother had raised her to be. She looked human, broken, real. How did you find me? He asked without turning. I called every client you work for, visited every place you mentioned loving. She sat beside him, leaving space between them. The lady at the bakery on Calle 37 said you bought coffee here yesterday. I've been waiting since sunrise. Jalen said nothing, just stared at the pigeons pecking at crumbs near his feet. Silence stretched between them, heavy, necessary. Finally, Camila spoke. I was going to tell you that night. Dinner. That's why I asked my mother to cook, to make it special. Her voice trembled. But she found the pregnancy test before I could hide it. And she turned it into a weapon. She's good at that. Yes, she is. Camila swallowed hard. And I let her. For weeks, I let her say horrible things about you while I just sat there. I told myself I was keeping peace. But I was keeping silence. And silence isn't peace, Jalen. It's betrayal. He finally looked at her. Really looked. She was crying again. But these weren't performative tears, they were the kind that cost something. The kind you can't fake. I saw the messages, he said quietly. Between you and Rodrigo. Camila closed her eyes. I know. Did you?
No.
Her voice was firm. I met him for coffee once. My mother arranged it without telling me until I arrived. I should have left immediately. I didn't. And that's on me. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. But I never touched him. Never wanted to. I was confused, Jalen. Not tempted. He wanted to believe her. Desperately. Why didn't you defend me? The question escaped before he could stop it, raw, bleeding. 3 weeks, Camila. She called me a loser, a burden, a mistake. And you just let her. Camila's face crumbled. Because I was scared. Because part of me, a small, ugly part, wondered if she was right. She held up a hand before he could respond. Not about you. About me. Whether I was strong enough to choose my own life instead of the one she designed for me. She moved closer, closing the gap between them. But these past 4 days without you? I've never been more sure of anything. Her hand found his, tentative, trembling. You're not the mistake, Jalen. Letting my mother control me was the mistake. Letting you feel invisible was the mistake. Jalen stared at their intertwined fingers. Her hand felt familiar, warm, like home used to feel. I can't go back to pretending, he said slowly. I can't sit at that table, swallowing insults, watching you choose her comfort over my dignity. I know. If I come back. He paused, the weight of the question settling in his chest. If she stays, will you choose me? Every time. Camila didn't hesitate. She leaves tomorrow. The words landed like a bomb on a wound he'd been nursing for years. She's your mother, Camila. And you're my husband, the father of my child. Her grip tightened. I can love her and still demand she respect my family. But if she refuses, Camila shook her head. Then she doesn't get to be part of it. Jalen studied her face, searched for doubt, found none. For the first time in weeks, something loosened in his chest. I need to hear you say it, he whispered. Not for her, for us. Camila lifted his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles gently. I choose you, Jalen Creed. Today. Tomorrow. Every day after. They returned home together, hand in hand, united, ready. The house was quiet when they walked through the door. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting golden shadows across the living room. Valentina sat on the couch, suitcase beside her, but not packed. She was scrolling through her phone, unbothered, confident, like a queen awaiting servants to beg forgiveness. She looked up when they entered. Her eyes narrowed at their joined hands. Ah, so the prodigal husband returns. She set down her phone. I assume you've come to apologize for your outburst at dinner? Jalen almost laughed. Almost. Camila stepped forward. He's not apologizing. Neither am I. Valentina's eyebrow arched. Excuse me? You heard me, Mama. Camila released Jalen's hand, not to distance herself, but to stand fully on her own. I've spent 31 years trying to make you proud, trying to be the daughter you designed in your head. But I'm done. Valentina stood slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to cold fury. Camila, you're emotional. The pregnancy hormones. Don't. Camila's voice cut like steel. Don't reduce my clarity to hormones. I've never seen things more clearly. She gestured toward Jalen. This man, the one you called a loser, a burden, a mistake, works 3 jobs to provide for us. He left his country, his career, his entire life because I asked him to. He's been humiliated under his own roof for 3 weeks. And he never once disrespected you. Not once. Valentina scoffed. Because he had nothing to say. Because he had everything to lose. Camila's voice cracked but didn't break. He stayed silent to keep peace in my home, to protect my relationship with you, even when you didn't deserve protection. Jalen watched his wife transform before his eyes. This wasn't the woman who'd sat quietly at dinner tables, avoiding conflict. This was someone new, someone forged in the fire of almost losing everything. Valentina seemed to sense the shift too. Her composure flickered. Mija, I only wanted what's best for you. No. You wanted what's best for your image. Camila shook her head. A wealthy son-in-law you could brag about at your country club. A life that looked perfect in photographs. You never asked what I wanted. You never cared that I was happy. Happy? Valentina gestured around the room. In this house? With this man who can barely. He built this life with his hands. Camila stepped closer to her mother. What did you ever build, Mama? You inherited everything. Your money, your status, your arrogance. You've never sacrificed anything for anyone. The words hit their target. Valentina's face reddened. How dare you? How dare I? Camila laughed bitterly. You invited another man into my marriage. You told me to leave my husband while pregnant with his child. You spent 3 weeks trying to destroy the only person who's ever loved me without conditions. She pointed toward the door. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning. I've already booked it. Valentina's mouth fell open. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Camila's voice softened, not with weakness, but with finality. I love you, Mama, but love doesn't mean tolerating abuse. If you want to be part of my life, part of your grandchild's life, you'll learn to respect my husband. Not tolerate, respect. She held her mother's gaze. Until then, we have nothing more to discuss. Silence filled the room like floodwater. Valentina looked between her daughter and Jalen, searching for weakness, for hesitation, finding none. For the first time since her arrival, the older woman had no words, no weapons, no control. She grabbed her suitcase handle with trembling hands. You'll regret this, she whispered.
No, Camila replied.
I'll regret the years I wasted letting you control me. But that ends today. Valentina walked toward the guest room without another word. The door slammed behind her, and in the silence that followed, Jalen pulled his wife into his arms, held her as she trembled, kissed the top of her head. You didn't have to do that, he murmured. Camila looked up at him, tears streaming but smiling. Yes, I did. I should have done it weeks ago. The next morning, Valentina left.
No epalegi. No tirfel gudvie.
Just a stiff nod toward Camila, a cold glance at Jalen, and the click of designer heels disappearing into an airport taxi. Jalen stood at the window, watching the car vanish down the street. She'll come around, Camila said softly, standing beside him. Eventually. Maybe. He turned to face her. Maybe not. But that's not our burden to carry. Camila nodded slowly.
No.
It's not. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like theirs again. The air was lighter. The walls stopped closing in. Home had returned, not because Valentina left, but because they'd finally fought for it together. The months that followed weren't perfect. Healing never is. There were difficult conversations, tears, moments when old wounds reopened and demanded attention. Jalen learned to voice his pain instead of burying it. Camila learned to listen without defending, to sit in discomfort rather than flee from it. They attended couples counseling, a small office in El Centro, with a therapist named Dr. Rosa who spoke both Spanish and English and refused to let either of them hide behind language. Marriage isn't about never hurting each other, she told them once. It's about choosing repair over retreat. Every single time, they chose repair. Again and again. Jalen cut back on his jobs. 2 instead of 4. Camila insisted. We'll figure out the money together, she said. But I need you present. Not just providing. Present. It was the first time she'd acknowledged what he'd been sacrificing. The first time she'd truly seen the cost. He cried that night, quietly in the bathroom where she wouldn't hear. But she did hear. And she held him without asking questions. Just held him until the shaking stopped. That was the night he knew they'd survive. 7 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Luciana, light in Spanish, because she was light after darkness, hope after despair, the living proof that broken things could mend stronger than before. Jalen held her in the hospital room, tears streaming freely down his face. She was so small, so perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, eyes squeezed shut against a world she hadn't yet learned to fear. She has your nose? Camila whispered from the bed, exhausted but radiant. And your stubbornness? He replied, laughing through tears. I can already tell. Valentina sent flowers. A card with 3 words. Congratulations. She's beautiful. It wasn't an apology, but it was a door left open. Camila texted back a photo of Luciana. Nothing more. Some bridges rebuild slowly. Some never rebuild at all. But the choice to try, that was enough for now. On Luciana's first birthday, Jalen stood in their backyard. Still modest, still imperfect, but now filled with laughter and streamers and neighbors who'd become family. Camila approached him, cake frosting on her cheek, their daughter balanced on her hip. What are you thinking about? She asked. Jalen smiled, looking around at the life they'd built. The one everyone said wouldn't last. The one Valentina had tried to destroy. I'm thinking, I used to believe love meant being silent, enduring, disappearing so someone else could shine. He reached out, wiping the frosting from her cheek. But real love is being seen, completely, even the ugly parts. Camila leaned into his touch. I see you, Jalen Creed. All of you. He kissed her forehead, then his daughters, then looked up at the sky, vast and endless and full of possibility. Yeah, he whispered. I know. True hearts, this is where we leave them, not at an ending, but at a beginning. Because love stories don't end when the credits roll. They continue in the quiet moments, the chosen repairs, the daily decisions to stay, to see, to fight for something bigger than pride. If the story touched your heart, smash that subscribe button. Join the Twisted Love Tales family. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are worthy of being seen, completely, without apology. Until next time, true hearts. Stay twisted. Stay loved. The end.